Hi, I'm Pam Norley, and I'm excited today to be joined by Jennifer Morris, the CEO of the Nature Conservancy. TNC works to create a world where people and nature can thrive together. And Jennifer joins us today to talk about how vital nature is for our health, our communities, and our economy, especially now as we think about how we'll rebuild and recover from this global pandemic. So let's jump right in. So Jennifer, we know that our health as humans is linked to the health of the environment around us. And as we face this ongoing human health crisis, can you talk about the health of our planet and what it means for us today?
Absolutely, Pam. Thanks so much. And it's a pleasure to be here. We are facing, obviously, one of the biggest challenges that our generation has ever faced with the COVID-19 crisis right now. And the link between nature and the COVID-19 crisis has never been more apparent than when recently, about 2 months ago or so, the World Health Organization came out with a very important statement, which was the most important way for the planet to recover from COVID-19 and to prevent the next pandemic is to protect nature. And the reason is fairly obvious to many of you, which is, of course, the spread of pandemics coming from zoonotic diseases from wildlife. Scientists are still debating exactly which species the current COVID-19 came from, but we know that it came from the improper use of wildlife. So that connection between protecting, preserving, and respecting nature and nature's relevance to human health has never been more critical than it is now. And so for the Nature Conservancy, and as a new CEO of the Nature Conservancy, we're really leaning into this. We're leaning into the two big crises and opportunities, quite frankly, facing our planet. One is to recover better as a human society, and that means to invest in the conservation of biodiversity, to invest in ensuring that nature and natural capital are valued in the new post-COVID-19 economies around the world. And then secondly, of course, the climate emergency.
And so talk to me about the work of TNC and how you approach kind of addressing these major issues facing our planet.
Our approach is really to focus on where we can have the biggest impacts. So as I mentioned, those two pillars of climate change, climate crisis, as well as biodiversity conservation. There are parts of this planet of ours where those two things come together. So we call these, irrecoverable climate ecosystems, places where biodiversity is very, very rich and also under threat, as well as those natural systems have deep carbon reserves. So if we lose these areas, we end up having a real crisis on our hands. Look, the reality is this: if we all went carbon neutral tomorrow, but we did not address land use change, we would never achieve our goals under the Paris Accord. About 30% of the solution for climate change rests in preserving, restoring, and protecting nature. So the Nature Conservancy, as the name suggests, comes at the climate crisis really focused on that. We work in 72 countries. We work with governments. We work with corporations, both small and large. And of course, we work with local communities, in particular indigenous communities, to ensure that they have the ability to preserve their own ecosystems into the future.
So what does the work look like working with those indigenous communities?
We really want to work with those local organizations to help them have a voice. So we'll do things like training, technical assistance, help them get land tenure to their lands. But it's not just land tenure, it's also about economic development. I'll give you an example of something we're doing in Kenya right now. Is we're working with local small businesses, tourism operators, who have been absolutely decimated by the COVID-19 crisis because, of course, tourism has dried up in those areas. And we're providing them with emergency funding to ensure they can pay their wildlife rangers. We can ensure that they're able to pay their conservancy fees to keep those lands under conservation. And we're helping to create a blended finance facility right now using both commercial and private philanthropy to help invest in those businesses and provide them with patient capital to get them through COVID and to stay alive and afloat so that tourism remains a critical revenue driver for conservation in these communities.
What do you think the role of nature will be in our recovery from this pandemic?
we have to protect nature to prevent the next pandemic and to build back better. And what does that mean in practice? It specifically means we need to stop wildlife trafficking. We need to shut down illegal wildlife markets all over the world. It's not just China. There are many parts of the world. And when they're legal, we need to make sure that they're extremely well regulated. So that's kind of the direct vector of zoonotic diseases. But in general, the role of nature is critical, as we're seeing so many of us are spending a lot more time in nature. So we need nature for so many things that are, related to our agricultural systems, for pollinators, for regulating water, for protein sources from the ocean, et cetera, et cetera. But we also need nature for our psychic renewal and preservation. And I think there's a lot of interesting studies, including one that the Nature Conservancy is doing with some partners in Louisville, Kentucky right now, called the Green Heart Initiative, which is actually doing the first longitudinal scientific study of the benefits of spending time in nature and planting trees in urban environments for your health, specifically for cardiac health. And it's a fascinating study. So we're actually trying to look at the specific vectors and determining factors for the connections of nature and human health.
Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us and for sharing with us the depth of information about the important work of the Nature Conservancy. We wish you much continued success.
Thank you so much, Pam. Appreciate your time.